domed throne stands beneath a ceiling alive with crimson lightning. Ancient stone sweats with moisture. Vast shadows drift across carved Sith statues, older than the Republic itself. Somewhere beyond the walls, storm winds howl across a dead world, hidden at the edge of the unknown regions. Suspended above an abyss of machinery hangs a broken figure attached to tubes and cables, his skin pale as ash, his body barely able to contain the power raging inside it. This is the mystery of how Palpatine truly cheated death, and for the next little while you can simply settle in, listen, and let the story carry you across the long centuries of Sith ambition. If you have joined these journeys before, quietly note which night this is for you. If you are new here, you may claim Night 1. The strange thing about Emperor Palpatine's return is that almost everyone inside the Star Wars galaxy agrees on one fact. He died, not vanished, not escaped, not disappeared into rumor. He died aboard the second Death Star in 4 ABY during the Battle of Endor. The heroes who survived believed it. The Rebel Alliance believed it. The galaxy celebrated because of it. Yet 31 years later, during the events of the Rise of Skywalker, in 35 ABY, the Emperor stood once more beneath the storms of Exegol. The question is not whether Palpatine died. The deeper question is what happened after death reached him. Before we travel to Exegol, we must return to the forest moon of Endor. Green forests covered the moon below, while one of the largest battles in galactic history unfolded above. The Rebel Alliance committed nearly everything it had to destroy the Empire's newest battle station. Admiral Akbar commanded the fleet. General Lando Calrissian piloted the Millennium Falcon into the heart of the battle. On the surface, Han Solo, Leia Organa, and a strike team worked to destroy the shield generator protecting the station. Meanwhile, high above the moon, Luke Skywalker faced the two most dangerous men in the galaxy. The throne room aboard Death Star 2 remains one of the most important locations in Star Wars history. Emperor Palpatine had engineered the entire confrontation. Luke had willingly surrendered himself on Endor and was brought before the Emperor. Through massive viewports, Palpatine showed him the rebel fleet arriving exactly as planned. The Emperor did not merely expect victory, he expected complete domination. The rebel fleet was trapped. The shield remained active. Hundreds of Imperial Star Destroyers waited nearby. Most importantly, Palpatine believed Luke Skywalker would finally abandon the Jedi path and become his new apprentice. If you listen closely to the dialogue in Return of the Jedi, Palpatine reveals something essential about his character. He is never satisfied with victory alone. He wants control over every possible outcome. He speaks as though events have already happened because, in his mind, they effectively have. For decades, he manipulated the Republic, the Separatists, the Jedi Order, and even his own apprentice Darth Vader. From the invasion of Naboo in 32 BBY to the rise of the Galactic Empire in 19 BBY, Palpatine built his life around eliminating uncertainty. Death itself would eventually become another uncertainty he sought to eliminate. The duel between Luke and Vader pushed events toward a conclusion neither Sith Lord fully anticipated. Luke refused the dark side despite overwhelming temptation. Vader, once Anakin Skywalker, watched his son suffer beneath torrents of Force lightning. Then came one of the defining moments of the saga. Vader seized Palpatine and lifted him from the throne platform. The Emperor screamed and unleashed lightning in every direction. Moments later, he vanished into the reactor shaft below. A burst of blue energy erupted from the depths. Shortly afterward, Death Star 2 exploded over Endor. From the perspective of everyone present, there was no ambiguity. Palpatine had fallen hundreds of meters into the station's core. The battle station itself was destroyed. Even Vader died from the injuries he sustained while saving Luke. When celebration spread across the galaxy, nobody searched for the Emperor. Nobody hunted for signs of survival. Worlds that had suffered beneath Imperial rule lit fires and filled streets with celebration. On Coruscant, according to later canon material, unrest erupted. Across countless systems, the Empire suddenly appeared vulnerable. The age of Palpatine seemed finished. Yet there is an odd detail hidden inside this certainty. Why did Palpatine never appear afraid? Not merely in the throne room, but throughout his entire reign. He feared defeat, certainly. He feared rivals. He feared losing control. But ordinary mortality rarely appears in his words or actions. By the time of Return of the Jedi, he was already over 80 years old. His body bore the scars of dark side corruption. His face, transformed during the confrontation with Mace Windu in 19 BBY, reflected decades of Sith power consuming flesh from within, and still he pursued plans stretching far beyond a normal lifespan. To understand why, we must travel back even further, long before Endor, to a conversation that took place in the final years of the Republic. The setting was the galaxy's opera house on Coruscant. Elegant lights illuminated private viewing chambers while performances unfolded below. There, in 19 BBY during the Clone Wars, Chancellor Palpatine sat beside Anakin Skywalker and told one of the most famous stories in Star Wars lore. It was not a military briefing. It was not political strategy. It was a lesson about death. The story concerned Darth Plagueis the Wise, a Sith Lord who existed before the fall of the Republic. Palpatine described him as a master so powerful and so knowledgeable that he could influence midi-chlorians to create life and prevent others from dying. The tale fascinated Anakin because he desperately wanted to save Padme Amidala from the death he had foreseen in visions. Palpatine understood this perfectly. Every word was chosen with care. Whether every detail of the story was true remains uncertain, but its purpose was unmistakable. Palpatine was presenting death not as an unavoidable reality, but as a problem that knowledge could solve. Then came the line that echoes through the decades. Plagueis, according to Palpatine, taught his apprentice everything he knew. Eventually, that apprentice killed him in his sleep. Anakin focused on the promise of saving loved ones. The audience understood something darker. The apprentice in the story was Palpatine himself. By the time he shared the tale, Darth Plagueis was long dead, and Palpatine ruled the Republic from its highest office. Yet the most interesting question was never whether Plagueis existed. The mystery was what lessons survived him. Canon never confirms that Darth Plagueis truly mastered immortality. In fact, his death strongly suggests he did not. But the story reveals Palpatine's obsession. He collected forbidden knowledge. He studied ancient Sith traditions. He searched archives hidden from both the Jedi and the public. Long before the Empire existed, he was already examining the boundaries separating life from death. Many years later, standing beneath the storms of Exegol, the consequences of that obsession would finally become visible. The path toward Palpatine's return did not begin at Endor. It began decades earlier, when a future emperor first became convinced that death was merely another enemy waiting to be conquered. Why did Palpatine spend so much time studying death if he already possessed everything else? By the final years of the Republic, he controlled vast political influence, commanded hidden networks across the galaxy, and stood on the verge of destroying the Jedi Order. Yet the Sith tradition had always taught that power alone was not enough. Every Sith master eventually faced the same humiliation. No matter how many worlds they conquered, age arrived, bodies weakened, apprentices plotted betrayal. Even the greatest Dark Lords disappeared into history. Palpatine's greatest ambition was not becoming emperor. It was escaping the fate that had claimed every Sith before him. The Sith order that Palpatine inherited was already shaped by centuries of secrecy. After the destruction of the old Sith empires, Darth Bane established the rule of two roughly 1,000 years before the Clone Wars. One master would possess power, one apprentice would crave it. Each generation would grow stronger by destroying the one before it. Canon repeatedly confirms that Palpatine, as Darth Sidious, embraced this tradition completely. Yet there is a contradiction buried inside the rule of two. The Sith preached domination, but their system guaranteed eventual replacement. Every master trained the individual most likely to kill them. Palpatine never seemed content with that arrangement. Throughout the prequel trilogy and later canon material, he constantly searched for alternatives. He cultivated Darth Maul, then Darth Tyrannus, then Darth Vader. He tempted Luke Skywalker. Later, he manipulated Ben Solo from across the galaxy. Each apprentice served a purpose, but Palpatine rarely behaved like a man preparing to pass on his legacy. Instead, he acted like someone searching for a way to keep the legacy entirely for himself. The distinction matters because it changes how we interpret everything that followed. One of the clearest clues appears in the years after the rise of the Empire. In 19 BBY, following the events of Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine finally achieved his political dream. The Republic became the Galactic Empire. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant fell. Thousands of Jedi died during Order 66. The Senate gradually lost authority while Imperial governors gained power. Yet victory did not slow Palpatine's pursuit of hidden knowledge. If anything, it accelerated it. Freed from political constraints, he could devote enormous resources to projects invisible to the wider galaxy. This brings us to a pattern that appears repeatedly throughout modern canon. Palpatine became obsessed with ancient Sith sites. He sent expeditions into forgotten regions of space. He collected relics connected to long-dead Dark Lords. In the comic series following The Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader encounters numerous traces of this obsession. The Emperor possessed archives filled with forbidden knowledge. He maintained secret observatories on worlds such as Pilio and Jakku. These locations were not military necessities. They were gateways into mysteries that predated the Republic itself. Why would an emperor ruling millions of worlds care about ancient ruins hidden beyond known space? The answer begins to emerge when we examine the unknown regions. Unlike the heavily mapped core worlds and mid-rim territories, the unknown regions remained dangerous and poorly understood. Hyperspace routes shifted unpredictably. Navigation was difficult. Entire sectors remained unexplored. Even during the Republic's golden age, countless expeditions vanished there. For someone seeking secrets buried beyond the reach of the Jedi, few places offered greater promise. Somewhere within those remote territories lay Exegol. Canon describes Exegol as an ancient Sith world concealed deep within the unknown regions. Reaching it safely required special navigational devices called Sith Wayfinders. By the time audiences first see Exegol in The Rise of Skywalker, its existence feels sudden, yet the planet itself had been waiting in the shadows for generations. Massive statues towered over its landscape. Ancient temples pierced the storm-filled sky. The architecture suggested a civilization devoted entirely to Sith power long before Palpatine's birth. The remarkable thing about Exegol is not merely its age, it is its scale. Beneath the planet's surface stretched enormous industrial complexes, cloning laboratories, shipyards, and ceremonial chambers. The final Order fleet would eventually emerge from these depths, consistent of thousands of Ziston-class star destroyers, equipped with planet-killing weapons. Such infrastructure could not appear overnight. Decades of labor were required. Resources had to be transported across the unknown regions. Personnel had to be recruited, organized, and hidden. Someone was preparing Exegol long before the Emperor fell at Endor. At the center of these preparations stood the Sith Eternal. Unlike Imperial officers in polished uniforms or stormtroopers marching through city streets, the Sith Eternal operated almost entirely in secret. They functioned as a cult devoted to preserving Sith rule. When Rey arrives on Exegol in 35 ABY, thousands of hooded followers fill the massive amphitheater surrounding the Sith citadel. They chant, they observe, they wait. Their presence reveals something extraordinary. Palpatine's ambitions survived not only in machines and laboratories, but in living believers who spent decades preparing for his return. Here the mystery deepens. When exactly did the Sith Eternal begin serving Palpatine? Canon leaves many details unanswered. Some evidence suggests the cult existed before the Empire itself. Other clues imply that Palpatine gradually expanded its influence during his reign. Whatever the precise timeline, the result is unmistakable. While the Galactic Senate debated legislation and rebel cells fought Imperial occupation, an entirely separate civilization was growing in darkness beyond known space. Few beings in the galaxy knew it existed. A popular fan theory argues that Palpatine always expected the possibility of death at Endor. The theory does not claim he planned to lose. Canon gives no indication that he desired defeat. Rather, the theory suggests he prepared contingency plans so extensive that even catastrophic failure could not end his ambitions. Interestingly, several canon projects support part of this idea. After Palpatine's death, Imperial contingency operations activated across the galaxy. Secret instructions were carried out. Fleet movements occurred. Long-prepared plans unfolded automatically. The existence of these contingencies proves that Palpatine spent years preparing for scenarios most rulers preferred not to contemplate. Yet plans alone cannot explain survival. Hidden worlds cannot explain survival. Loyal followers cannot explain survival. Sooner or later, we arrive at a more uncomfortable question. If Palpatine truly intended to overcome death itself, what mechanism was he counting on? Ancient Sith rituals offered one possibility. Another came from science. During the final decades of the Republic and the rise of the Empire, cloning technology had already transformed galactic history. Millions of clone troopers had fought across the Clone Wars. Kaminoan scientists demonstrated that bodies could be replicated on an industrial scale. For a mind as ruthless as Palpatine's, the obvious next question was impossible to ignore. If an army could be cloned, why not an emperor? If cloning was already common during the Clone Wars, why did Palpatine's resurrection prove so difficult? At first glance, the problem seems simple. The Kaminoans produced millions of genetically identical soldiers for the Grand Army of the Republic. By the time of the Clone Wars, cloning technology was one of the greatest scientific achievements in the galaxy. Yet the body hanging within the machinery of Exegol tells a different story. The Emperor who returned was not healthy. He was not whole. His flesh appeared damaged and unstable, as though even death itself had left scars that technology could not fully erase. To understand this problem, we must remember what made Palpatine different from ordinary beings. A clone trooper carried a human mind inside a cloned body. The process involved biology, training, and memory. Palpatine's challenge involved something far stranger. He was one of the most powerful Force users in galactic history. His consciousness was steeped in decades of dark side corruption and Sith knowledge. Cloning a body was one task. Creating a vessel capable of containing that immense power was another entirely. The Force itself became the obstacle. Modern Star Wars canon has gradually revealed how deeply the Empire invested in solving this obstacle. Some of the clearest clues appear in the Bad Batch. Following the fall of the Republic in 19 BBY, Imperial scientists expanded research far beyond the military cloning programs once operated on Kamino. The Empire eventually dismantled much of Kamino's infrastructure. Cities such as Tipoca City were destroyed. Scientists were relocated. Knowledge was gathered and concentrated under Imperial control. Rather than ending cloning research, Palpatine appears to have centralized it. A key location in this story is Mount Tantus on the planet Wayland. Hidden far from public attention, the facility became one of the Empire's most important research centers. In the Bad Batch, Mount Tantus serves as the headquarters of Dr. Royce Hemlock, a scientist whose work focuses heavily on genetic experimentation. Hemlock is not interested merely in creating soldiers. He seeks something far more valuable. He wants to understand how Force sensitivity can be transferred, replicated, or preserved through biological means. This goal explains why characters such as Omega become so important. Unlike most clone subjects, Omega possesses unique genetic qualities that attract intense Imperial attention. Throughout the later seasons of the Bad Batch, references emerge to a larger objective hidden behind Hemlock's experiments. The name Project Necromancer eventually surfaces. For longtime Star Wars fans, the word immediately stands out. Necromancy traditionally refers to communication with the dead or the restoration of life. The Empire's choice of terminology hardly feels accidental. Project Necromancer occupies a fascinating position within canon because its complete details remain hidden. We know it existed. We know Imperial scientists devoted enormous resources to it. We know the Emperor took a direct interest in its success. What we do not yet know is every stage of its development. Lucasfilm has deliberately left portions of the puzzle unsolved, yet the pieces already visible point toward a single conclusion. The Empire was attempting to create a reliable method for preserving powerful, Force-sensitive individuals beyond the limits of ordinary life. Another crucial clue appears years later in The Mandalorian, set after the fall of the Empire but before the rise of the First Order. The series introduces remnants of Imperial research scattered throughout the Outer Rim. On Navarro, Din Djarin and his allies discover laboratory facilities containing mysterious biological experiments. Dr. Pershing, a former Imperial scientist, speaks about genetic work involving blood samples with unusually high M counts. The term refers to midichlorians, the microscopic life forms associated with Force sensitivity. Once again, the same pattern emerges. The Empire is not merely cloning bodies. It is chasing a way to reproduce or preserve extraordinary Force potential. Grogu becomes central to this effort. Imperial remnants repeatedly attempt to capture him because his blood possesses properties valuable to their research. Moff Gideon wants access to these capabilities. Scientists analyze samples. Experiments proceed in hidden facilities. Importantly, The Mandalorian never directly states that Grogu is connected to Palpatine's resurrection. Yet the thematic connection is difficult to ignore. Across multiple series, canon repeatedly returns to the same question. How can science interact with the Force without destroying what makes the Force unique? The answer, it seems, is that success proved extraordinarily rare. Many cloned bodies could be created. Very few could sustain powerful Force abilities. This helps explain the disturbing appearance of Palpatine's body on Exegol decades later. If Project Necromancer struggled for years to create viable vessels, then the Emperor's survival was never a perfect triumph. It was a compromise. His consciousness endured, but the body housing it deteriorated under the strain. The dark side granted persistence, yet demanded a terrible cost. Here we arrive at one of the most important distinctions in modern canon. Some older legends, stories, explored cloning and resurrection in different ways, particularly the Dark Empire comics from the expanded universe. Those stories are no longer canon. Modern Star Wars has chosen a different path. Instead of presenting resurrection as a relatively straightforward transfer into healthy clone bodies, current canon emphasizes instability. Every clue from Exegol, Mount Tantus, Project Necromancer, and the Sith Eternal points toward the same idea. Palpatine did not discover an elegant solution to mortality. He discovered a deeply flawed one. But even flawed survival requires a moment of transition. A clone body waiting on Exegol cannot help an Emperor plummeting through the reactor shaft of Death Star 2. Laboratories cannot explain what happened during the seconds immediately after death. The greatest mystery remains untouched. When Palpatine's body was destroyed above Endor in 4ABY, what exactly crossed the threshold between life and death? What escaped the flames long enough to reach Exegol at all? That question leads us away from science and directly into the oldest secret of the Sith. What actually happened in the instant Palpatine died? Not the political consequences, not the collapse of Imperial authority. The real mystery lies within a span of seconds somewhere above Endor in 4ABY. An old body plunged into darkness. A reactor shaft swallowed the Emperor. Blue energy erupted. Then Death Star 2 exploded. When the firestorm ended, nothing physical remained. Yet decades later, Palpatine stood once more beneath the storms of Exegol and openly declared, "I have died before." The statement forces us to confront a strange possibility. Death occurred, but it did not finish the story. The strongest canon explanation comes from material connected to the rise of Skywalker. The film itself leaves many details unstated, presenting Palpatine's return as a terrifying fact rather than a carefully explained process. Supplemental canon sources, however, provide additional context. These sources indicate that Palpatine employed a Sith technique often described as essence transfer. The concept is ancient and deeply rooted in dark side traditions. Rather than preserving the body, the technique focuses on preserving consciousness. In simple terms, the Sith attempts to project the self beyond physical destruction. This immediately separates Palpatine's achievement from the path followed by the Jedi. Throughout Star Wars canon, certain Jedi learn how to maintain identity after death through the Force. Qui-Gon Jinn begins uncovering the secret during the final years of the Republic. Yoda studies it during the Clone Wars. Obi-Wan Kenobi preserves himself after his death aboard the first Death Star in 0 BBY. Eventually, Anakin Skywalker joins them after Return of the Jedi. These four spirits remain luminous, peaceful, and aligned with the will of the Force itself. Palpatine sought something fundamentally different. The Sith do not accept surrender. They do not seek unity with the Force. Their philosophy revolves around domination, control, and personal survival. This distinction explains why Sith immortality often appears unstable compared to the serenity of Jedi Force ghosts. Palpatine did not wish to become one with eternity. He wanted to remain Palpatine. Every ambition, every hatred, every memory, every scheme had to survive intact. The dark side offered a path toward that goal, but the path was violent and unnatural. A revealing clue appears during the final confrontation on Exegol. Palpatine tells Rey that generations of Sith live within him. The statement can be interpreted in several ways. Some fans view it metaphorically, referring to Sith teachings passed from master to apprentice. Others believe it hints at deeper rituals involving accumulated dark side consciousness. Canon has not fully resolved the question. What matters for our story is that Palpatine clearly viewed identity as something transferable. He believed the self could move from one vessel to another. Ancient Sith culture contains numerous examples of this obsession. Exegol itself reflects it. Massive statues watch from darkness. Ritual chambers stretch beneath the citadel. The architecture feels less like a government facility and more like a temple devoted to overcoming mortality. Every corridor suggests centuries of experimentation. Every carved symbol implies generations of Sith searching for the same answer. Long before Palpatine arrived, other Dark Lords were asking whether consciousness could survive bodily destruction. Interestingly, canon remains careful about how successful these earlier Sith were. Unlike some stories from the old Legends continuity, modern canon rarely presents ancient Sith as fully immortal beings wandering freely through history. Instead, we encounter traces, relics, echoes, lingering influences attached to objects or locations. The Sith mask recovered on Malachor in Rebels, for example, carries dark significance. Sith temples remain dangerous long after their builders die. Power lingers, but permanent survival remains elusive. Palpatine appears to be attempting something far more ambitious than preserving an echo. Imagine the moment itself. The throne room disappears above him. The reactor shaft rushes upward. Energy tears through flesh, already saturated with dark side power. Death arrives. Yet according to canon's implications, Palpatine had prepared for precisely this possibility, not because he expected Vader's betrayal, but because he expected death eventually. The contingency existed before the crisis. Somewhere across impossible distances, Exegol waited, laboratories waited, clone bodies waited. Most importantly, a destination waited for a consciousness determined not to vanish. This does not mean the transition was clean, quite the opposite. Everything we see later suggests catastrophic damage occurred. When Kylo Ren reaches Exegol in 35 ABY, the Emperor's body resembles a corpse animated by machinery. Mechanical arms support him. Vast devices feed energy into him. His fingers appear withered. His eyes burn with unnatural intensity. Nothing about the scene suggests triumph. It resembles survival, purchased at terrible cost. One of the most revealing lines in The Rise of Skywalker comes not from Palpatine himself, but from his appearance. The visual design communicates information before any explanation arrives. If essence transfer worked perfectly, why is the body failing? If immortality was achieved, why is constant mechanical support necessary? These questions point toward a crucial truth. Palpatine did not conquer death in the way he once imagined while speaking of Darth Plagueis. He escaped extinction, but escape is not the same thing as victory. The irony is profound. Decades earlier, he mocked Darth Plagueis for dying despite all his knowledge. He presented himself as the apprentice who surpassed the master. Yet by 35 ABY, he exists as a prisoner inside an imperfect vessel, hidden on a forgotten world at the edge of the galaxy. The Emperor survived, but survival required secrecy, machinery, cultists, laboratories, and endless preparation. What should have been the ultimate expression of power instead reveals deep vulnerability. And that vulnerability helps explain another mystery waiting in the shadows. If Palpatine truly possessed a body of his own on Exegol, why did he need figures like Snoke at all? If Palpatine survived on Exegol, why create Supreme Leader Snoke? At first glance, Snoke seems unnecessary. By the time audiences meet him in The Force Awakens, he already controls the First Order. Officers fear him. Kylo Ren obeys him. Entire fleets answer to his commands. Yet The Rise of Skywalker later reveals a startling truth. Palpatine was behind him all along. Deep within the laboratories of Exegol, rows of incomplete Snoke bodies float inside transparent vats. The revelation immediately raises a question that refuses to go away. Why would the Emperor hide behind a proxy when his ultimate goal was to rule again himself? The answer begins with the condition of Palpatine's body. Everything we see on Exegol suggests he could not openly return to the galaxy after Endor. His physical form remained fragile. His survival depended upon machinery, cultists, and constant support. He possessed immense power, but power alone could not command star systems. A ruler hidden on a forbidden world, beyond known hyperspace routes, could not directly rebuild an empire. He needed an intermediary. He needed a public face capable of acting while the true architect remained concealed. Snoke fulfilled that role perfectly. From the perspective of the wider galaxy, he appeared to be a mysterious, force-sensitive leader who emerged from the unknown regions after the fall of the Empire. Little information existed about his origins. Even experienced figures such as Leia or Organa possessed only fragments of knowledge regarding him. By the time the First Order grew into a major military power, Snoke had already established authority over its leadership. General Hux served him. The First Order fleet served him. Most importantly, Ben Solo gradually fell under his influence. Palpatine later claims, "I made Snoke." The statement is brief but extraordinarily important. It confirms that Snoke was neither an independent Sith Lord nor a secret survivor from an earlier era. He was an engineered creation connected directly to Exegol's experiments. Modern canon often describes Snoke as a strand cast rather than a conventional clone. The distinction matters because strand casting involves complex genetic engineering rather than simple duplication. Scientists were not merely copying a template. They were attempting to create something tailored to a specific purpose. One fascinating aspect of Snoke is his genuine Force ability. He is not presented as a puppet lacking independent function. In The Last Jedi, he effortlessly dominates Kylo Ren. He senses emotions across vast distances. He manipulates objects through the Force with alarming ease. During the throne room sequence aboard the Supremacy, he demonstrates power that places him among the most formidable Force users seen in the sequel era. This suggests that Exegol's scientists achieved at least partial success. They created a being capable of wielding extraordinary Force sensitivity. Yet Snoke remains imperfect. His body bears visible deformities. His face carries deep scars. His appearance hints at artificial origins long before audiences learn the truth. Looking back, these details feel less accidental. The imperfections mirror the instability visible throughout Exegol's cloning programs. Again and again, canon suggests that producing viable Force-sensitive vessels is exceptionally difficult. Success exists, but it arrives alongside flaws. The Emperor's damaged body and Snoke's scarred appearance appear to be different expressions of the same underlying problem. Why not simply place Palpatine's consciousness into Snoke himself? This is where speculation enters carefully. Canon does not explicitly answer the question. However, the available evidence suggests that Snoke functioned best as a servant rather than a vessel. Palpatine controls events through him. He speaks through him. He manipulates galactic affairs through him. Yet Snoke possesses his own personality, mannerisms, and decisions. The relationship resembles a ruler directing a governor from afar rather than a consciousness inhabiting a replacement body. While Snoke consolidated power, another project unfolded simultaneously. The First Order expanded throughout the unknown regions. Former Imperial officers reorganized. Hidden shipyards produced warships. Children were recruited and trained as stormtroopers. Across decades, the movement grew stronger. Publicly, Snoke stood at its center. Secretly, Exegol remained the true destination. The First Order was never intended to be the final stage of Palpatine's plan. It was preparation, a bridge connecting the old empire to something far larger. This becomes clear when we compare the First Order to the Final Order. The First Order possesses Resurgent-class star destroyers, conventional fleets, and familiar military structures. The Final Order, revealed on Exegol, is something else entirely. Thousands of Ziston-class star destroyers wait beneath the planet's storms. each equipped with a super laser capable of destroying worlds. The scale dwarfs anything the First Order achieved alone. Suddenly, Snoke's purpose becomes easier to understand. He was managing one phase of a project whose true scope remained hidden, even from most of his followers. Perhaps the most tragic consequence of Snoke's existence concerns Ben Solo. Long before Ben became Kylo Ren, Palpatine had already begun influencing him. The Rise of Skywalker reveals that voices haunting Ben's life originated with the Emperor. Through Snoke, through whispers, through manipulation, Palpatine cultivated the grandson of Darth Vader as a potential successor. Decades after failing to corrupt Luke Skywalker above Endor, he began pursuing another member of the Skywalker bloodline. Once again, mortality shaped his decisions. He was not merely rebuilding an empire. He was searching for someone who could carry his power forward. And that search leads directly to another mystery hidden inside Palpatine's family itself. Snoke could command armies. Snoke could guide the First Order. Snoke could corrupt Ben Solo. Yet none of those achievements solved the Emperor's central problem. His body continued to fail. His survival remained incomplete. Somewhere in the galaxy, unknown to almost everyone involved, a different solution had already been born. A child living on the desert world of Jakku would eventually become more important to Palpatine's future than fleets, laboratories, or even the supreme leader who ruled in his name. Why did the most powerful Sith Lord in history become obsessed with a scavenger on Jakku? When Rey first appears in The Force Awakens, nothing about her life suggests a connection to the Emperor. She survives among the wreckage of old starships. She trades salvaged components for food portions. She lives alone inside the remains of an AT-AT walker, abandoned after the Galactic Civil War. Yet by the time The Rise of Skywalker reaches its climax, Palpatine considers Rey more valuable than fleets, armies, or entire worlds. To understand why, we must look at one of the strangest branches of his family tree. For decades, Star Wars fans assumed Palpatine had no descendants. The Emperor rarely displayed personal attachments. His public image revolved around authority rather than family. When The Rise of Skywalker revealed that Rey was his granddaughter, the revelation altered the entire mystery surrounding Exegol. Suddenly, the story was no longer just about cloning and survival. It became a story about bloodlines. More specifically, it became a story about finding a vessel capable of sustaining power that cloned bodies could not reliably contain. Canon material published after the film provides crucial details. Rey's father was connected directly to Palpatine's cloning program. Importantly, he was not a conventional son born through an ordinary family life. Instead, he emerged from experiments associated with Palpatine's attempts to create viable bodies and descendants. Unlike the Emperor's failed physical vessels, however, Rey's father possessed a stable existence. He lived independently. He had his own identity, yet he lacked the immense force potential Palpatine desired. This distinction matters enormously. Palpatine did not simply need a living body. Exegol already possessed bodies. Laboratories already produced biological specimens. The problem was compatibility. Every clue in modern canon points toward the same obstacle. The Emperor's dark side power exceeded what most vessels could withstand. A stable bloodline offered something that laboratories struggled to manufacture artificially. Nature, in a sense, succeeded where engineering repeatedly failed. Rey's father eventually rejected the destiny others had designed for him. He escaped Palpatine's influence and built a life away from Exegol. Alongside his wife, he attempted to disappear into the vastness of the galaxy. Their daughter Rey was born. At first glance, this seems like a small event occurring far from the centers of galactic power. Yet from Palpatine's perspective, it represented a breakthrough. Here was a descendant carrying his lineage while also displaying the Force sensitivity missing from previous generations. The danger became clear as Rey grew older. By the time of The Force Awakens in 34 ABY, her natural abilities emerge almost instinctively. She pilots the Millennium Falcon despite limited experience. She resists interrogation by Kylo Ren. She begins using Force techniques without formal training. These moments surprised audiences when the film first released. In hindsight, they serve another purpose. They demonstrate exactly why Palpatine eventually becomes interested in her. Rey possesses extraordinary potential housed within a healthy, stable body. The hunt for Rey led directly to one of the darker figures connected to Exegol. Ochi of Bastoon served as an assassin loyal to Palpatine. His mission was simple: locate Rey, return her to the Emperor. Canon sources explain that Ochi tracked Rey's parents as they fled across the galaxy. They refused to reveal their daughter's location. Eventually, both were murdered. Their sacrifice ensured that Rey remained hidden long enough to survive into adulthood. It is a small tragedy within a larger galactic saga, but it changes everything that follows. Notice how different this strategy is from Palpatine's earlier pursuit of Luke Skywalker. During the original trilogy, Luke represented a powerful potential apprentice. Palpatine wanted to corrupt him. Rey occupies a more disturbing position. The Emperor's interest extends beyond recruitment. He views her as a possible solution to the problem that has haunted him since Endor. The distinction transforms every later interaction between them. He is not merely testing her strength, he is evaluating whether she can become the future of his survival. Why not use Ben Solo instead? The question deserves attention because Ben possesses an extraordinary lineage. He is the son of Leia Organa and Han Solo. He is the grandson of Darth Vader. His Force potential rivals that of the greatest Jedi. Palpatine certainly invests tremendous effort into manipulating him. Yet Ben appears intended primarily as an instrument. Through Snoke and other forms of influence, the Emperor shapes him into Kylo Ren. He becomes a weapon, an enforcer, and eventually a component of a much larger plan. A fascinating detail emerges once we consider both Rey and Ben together. Throughout the sequel trilogy, their connection grows stronger and stranger. They communicate across impossible distances. They share visions. Physical objects pass between them. By the rise of Skywalker, the phenomenon receives a name. They form a Force dyad. According to Palpatine, such a bond has not been seen for generations. The discovery shocks even him. Suddenly, the Emperor realizes that the solution he sought for decades may be more powerful than any clone vessel or engineered strandcast. The irony is unmistakable. Palpatine spent decades mastering laboratories, cults, fleets, and ancient Sith rituals. He built secret shipyards beneath Exegol. He manipulated galactic politics from beyond the grave. Yet the key to his future emerged through relationships he could never fully control. A hidden granddaughter, a fallen Skywalker, a bond neither of them understood. As the final order prepared to reveal itself to the galaxy, Palpatine's plans entered their most dangerous phase. At last, the pieces were assembled. Exegol was ready, Rey was coming, and beneath the eternal storms, the Emperor prepared a ritual that would determine whether his long war against death ended in triumph or failure. What exactly was Palpatine planning to do when Rey finally arrived on Exegol? The question sounds simple, yet it sits at the center of one of the most debated mysteries in modern Star Wars canon. Throughout the rise of Skywalker, Palpatine's intentions seem to shift. At one moment, he commands Rey to strike him down. Later, he attempts to absorb power from the Force dyad connecting Rey and Ben Solo. Some viewers interpreted these actions as contradictory. A closer look reveals something more interesting. The Emperor adapts because circumstances change, but his underlying objective remains remarkably consistent. By 35 ABY, the situation on Exegol had reached a critical stage. The Final Order fleet waited beneath the planet's storms. Massive Ziston-class star destroyers filled hidden shipyards stretching across the horizon. Each vessel carried a super laser capable of destroying an entire world. Sith eternal cultists packed the enormous amphitheater surrounding the Citadel. Decades of preparation had led to this moment. Palpatine no longer needed to hide indefinitely. He needed a permanent solution to his failing body. The scene between Rey and the Emperor begins with an invitation rather than an attack. Palpatine does not immediately attempt to kill her. Instead, he offers a throne. He presents lineage as destiny. He reveals their family connection. Then he tells her to strike him down in anger. The wording matters. He specifically emphasizes hatred. In Sith philosophy, emotion fuels power. Anger opens pathways into the dark side. Palpatine wants Rey to act not as a Jedi defending others, but as a descendant embracing vengeance. Why would the Emperor invite his own death when survival has driven his plans for decades? Canon strongly implies that the answer lies in essence transfer. Palpatine explains that if Rey kills him under the proper circumstances, his spirit and the accumulated power of the Sith will pass into her. This transforms the scene entirely. He is not requesting execution. He is proposing possession. The body standing before him is failing. Rey's body is young, powerful, and stable. The ritual offers a path toward continuation. Notice how closely this echoes the themes introduced decades earlier with Darth Plagueis. Back in the galaxy's opera house, Palpatine described overcoming death through secret knowledge. On Exegol, we finally witness what that ambition evolved into. Immortality is not portrayed as eternal youth. It is not regeneration. Instead, it resembles migration. The self survives by moving from vessel to vessel. The body becomes temporary. Identity becomes the thing that endures. At least that is the promise the Sith appear to pursue. Yet there is a subtle tension within the scene. Palpatine speaks confidently, but confidence does not necessarily equal certainty. Throughout Star Wars history, Sith rituals often carry risks. Ancient dark side techniques are powerful precisely because they challenge natural limits. The Emperor clearly believes the transfer can work. Whether every aspect of the process is guaranteed remains unanswered. Modern canon leaves room for mystery. The ritual feels dangerous not only for Rey, but for everyone involved. Then the situation changes unexpectedly. Ben Solo arrives on Exegol after rejecting the identity of Kylo Ren. His journey mirrors his grandfather Anakin's redemption in important ways. Earlier, on the ruins of the second Death Star above Kef Bir, Ben experienced a profound confrontation with memory and guilt. He cast away his red lightsaber. He reclaimed the name Ben Solo. By the time he reaches Exegol, Palpatine is no longer facing a lone descendant. He is facing two individuals connected through an extraordinary bond. This is where the concept of the Force dyad becomes essential. According to Palpatine, Rey and Ben together form something unseen for generations. Throughout the sequel trilogy, evidence of the dyad appears repeatedly. They communicate across enormous distances. Physical matter passes between them. Their experiences seem intertwined despite being separated by light years. By the rise of Skywalker, the bond has become powerful enough to alter events on a galactic scale. Even the Emperor appears surprised by its true potential. One of the most fascinating moments in the film occurs when Palpatine realizes he no longer requires the original ritual. Standing before him are not merely two strong Force users. Together they possess a source of energy capable of restoring him directly. His demeanor changes almost immediately. The frail figure supported by machinery straightens. His voice strengthens. His eyes brighten. He drains energy from the dyad, drawing vitality into his broken body. For the first time since audiences encountered him on Exegol, he appears genuinely renewed. The transformation reveals an uncomfortable truth. Palpatine's original plan was born from weakness. The possession ritual existed because he needed a replacement vessel. Once the dyad restores him, that necessity vanishes. He abandons the transfer entirely. This tells us something important about his priorities. The Emperor is not devoted to ritual for its own sake. He values results. If a more effective route to survival appears, he takes it immediately. Flexibility, not tradition, has always been one of his greatest strengths. For a brief moment, it seems as though he's finally achieved everything he wanted. The body that once hung crippled above the abyss is revitalized. The Final Order fleet prepares to launch. Rey lies defeated. Ben Solo has been cast into a chasm beneath the Citadel. Decades of planning appear complete. Yet, hidden within this apparent victory is the same flaw that has haunted Palpatine since the beginning. Every attempt to conquer death creates new vulnerabilities. Every solution introduces a fresh uncertainty. And in the final minutes of the battle above Exegol, those vulnerabilities are about to return with devastating consequences. If Palpatine came closer to immortality than any Sith before him, why did he ultimately fail? The answer begins during the final battle above Exegol in 35 ABY. Across the planet's storm-filled atmosphere, thousands of ships from across the galaxy converge against the Final Order. Resistance fighters led by Poe Dameron attempt the impossible. Citizens, smugglers, former rebels, and volunteers arrive from countless worlds. Meanwhile, deep within the Sith Citadel, the struggle between Rey and the Emperor reaches its conclusion. The fate of Palpatine's long war against death now depends on a single confrontation. After draining energy from the Force dyad, Palpatine briefly appears unstoppable. The machinery supporting him becomes unnecessary. His posture straightens. His voice regains its strength. Massive bolts of Force lightning erupt from his hands and spread across the sky above Exegol. Entire resistance formations suffer under the assault. Starships lose control. pilots struggle to maintain formation. The visual scale of the moment is extraordinary. Few displays of raw force power in canon rival what Palpatine achieves here. Yet beneath this display lies a familiar pattern. Throughout Star Wars history, Palpatine's greatest victories often contain the seeds of future defeat. During the Clone Wars, his manipulation of both the Republic and the Separatists created an empire. Decades later, the same culture of fear contributed to Imperial collapse. On Exegol, the Emperor again mistakes power for certainty. He assumes restoration equals permanence. He believes the Force Dyad has finally solved the problem that plagued him since Endor. In reality, the underlying conflict remains unresolved. Rey rises once more to face him. The moment carries echoes reaching back through the entire Skywalker saga. Luke Skywalker refused hatred aboard Death Star 2 in 4ABY. Anakin Skywalker rejected the Emperor while saving his son. Leia Organa dedicated her life to resisting tyranny. The Jedi tradition survives not through institutions or armies, but through individuals who choose compassion over domination. As Rey stands against Palpatine, those themes converge. The confrontation becomes larger than a duel between two Force users. One of the most discussed sequences in The Rise of Skywalker occurs when Rey hears the voices of past Jedi. Canon identifies numerous figures among them. Obi-Wan Kenobi speaks. Anakin Skywalker speaks. Yoda, Qui-Gon Jinn, Ahsoka Tano, Mace Windu, Kanan Jarrus, and others lend their voices as well. The scene does not suggest that these Jedi physically appear on Exegol. Rather, it represents connection through the Force. Rey draws strength from a tradition spanning generations, much as Palpatine draws strength from the accumulated legacy of the Sith. The contrast between these two philosophies could hardly be sharper. Palpatine's survival depends upon possession, domination, and the refusal to let go. The Jedi path embraces continuity without ownership. Obi-Wan remains Obi-Wan. Yoda remains Yoda. They guide others without attempting to inhabit their bodies or control their futures. The Emperor seeks eternity through conquest. The Jedi endure through influence. Exegol becomes the place where these competing visions finally collide. When Palpatine unleashes his lightning against Rey, he expects the encounter to end quickly. Instead, she withstands the assault using two lightsabers, Luke Skywalker's and Leia Organa's. The symbolism is unmistakable. One blade belongs to the son who rejected the dark side. The other belongs to the daughter who spent decades defending the New Republic and resistance. Together, they represent the family Palpatine spent generations trying to dominate. The energy he projects begins turning back upon him. For perhaps the first time since his restoration, genuine surprise appears. An important detail often goes unnoticed here. Palpatine is not defeated because someone discovers a new technique. He is not defeated because a hidden weapon appears. He falls because the very power he unleashed becomes impossible to control. This mirrors earlier moments in his life. Mace Windu reflected lightning back toward him in 19BBY. On Exegol, the phenomenon occurs again on a vastly greater scale. The Emperor's confidence blinds him to the danger until it is too late. The destruction that follows is catastrophic. Lightning consumes his body. Energy tears through the citadel. The restored form collapses. Explosions ripple throughout the surrounding structures. Unlike Endor, however, the circumstances differ significantly. This is not simply a physical death. The vessel empowered by the Dyad disintegrates at the very moment Palpatine attempts to impose absolute control over the Force. The result feels final in a way his earlier death did not. Yet one question lingers even after the battle ends. Is Palpatine truly gone forever? Modern canon deliberately avoids offering absolute certainty about many mysteries. The Emperor's history teaches caution. He already survived what once appeared impossible. At the same time, the narrative of the rise of Skywalker clearly presents Exegol as the culmination of his plans. The final order collapses. The Sith, eternal, is shattered. The facilities sustaining his survival are destroyed. Every major pillar supporting his return disappears in a single chain of events. And so we arrive at the strangest conclusion of all. Palpatine spent decades searching for immortality. He explored cloning, ancient Sith knowledge, essence transfer, hidden worlds, cults, and bloodlines. He manipulated generations of Skywalkers. He built fleets beneath eternal storms. He came closer than any Sith we know to escaping death completely. Yet in the end, the mystery of his survival reveals something unexpected. The Emperor never truly conquered mortality. He merely postponed it again and again while becoming increasingly dependent on fragile systems that could eventually fail. In the final part of our journey, we will step back from the events themselves and examine the remaining mysteries canon has not fully answered. The unanswered questions surrounding Project Necromancer, Exegol, and the deeper meaning of Palpatine's long battle against the inevitable. How much do we actually know about Palpatine's return, and how much remains hidden in the shadows between the stories? Even after the rise of Skywalker, the Bad Batch, and the Mandalorian, significant pieces of the puzzle remain missing. This is not unusual in Star Wars. Some mysteries are answered immediately, others unfold across decades of storytelling. Palpatine's survival belongs firmly in the second category. We now understand far more than audiences did in 2019, yet important questions still wait beyond the edge of confirmed canon. One of the largest unresolved pieces is Project Necromancer. The name appears directly in the Bad Batch, linking Imperial cloning efforts to a larger objective. We know Emperor Palpatine considered the project important enough to receive enormous resources. We know Dr. Hemlock's research at Mount Tantus contributed to its development. We know Force sensitivity played a crucial role. What we do not yet possess is a complete chronology connecting every stage of the project from the Imperial era to Exegol. Future stories will almost certainly continue filling that gap. The fall of Mount Tantus itself raises fascinating questions. By the conclusion of the Bad Batch, the facility suffers catastrophic destruction. Imperial research data is compromised. Key personnel die. Yet decades later, Exegol possesses advanced cloning laboratories capable of producing strand casts and sustaining Palpatine's damaged body. This implies that knowledge survived in other locations. Scientists may have escaped. Data may have been duplicated. Entire research programs may have existed beyond Wayland. The Emperor, after all, rarely trusted a single point of failure. Another mystery concerns the Sith Eternal. We know they operated on Exegol. We know they maintained the Final Order fleet. We know they preserved ancient Sith traditions. Yet their full history remains largely unexplored. How old was the organization? Did it exist before Darth Sidious discovered Exegol? Were its members recruited from across the galaxy, or born within isolated communities hidden in the unknown regions. Canon offers tantalizing hints without complete answers. Their vast numbers suggest decades of preparation, if not longer. Then there is the question of Exegol itself. Ancient statues dominate the landscape. Massive temples rise from black stone. Ritual chambers extend beneath the surface. Every visual detail implies a world important to the Sith long before Palpatine's era. Yet modern canon has revealed relatively little about the planet's earliest history. We know worlds such as Moraband and Malachor played major roles in ancient Sith lore. Exegol appears equally significant, perhaps even more so, but many of its secrets remain buried beneath the red storms. Some fans continue debating the precise nature of essence transfer. Did Palpatine's consciousness travel instantly from Endor to Exegol? Did intermediaries or rituals assist the process? Were Sith eternal cultists actively involved during the transition? Canon has not yet answered every detail. What it has established is the broad framework. Palpatine died physically at Endor. His consciousness endured through dark side methods. A prepared clone body on Exegol became the destination. The mechanism exists. The exact process remains partially obscured. Interestingly, the mystery becomes more compelling when we consider what canon deliberately rejects. In older Legends continuity, numerous stories explored cloned emperors, repeated resurrections, and alternate methods of survival. Those tales remain influential among longtime fans, but they are not part of current canon. Modern Star Wars has chosen a narrower path. Instead of endless returns, it presents Exegol as the culmination of decades of preparation. The emphasis falls on extraordinary effort rather than routine resurrection. Survival is possible, but it is costly, unstable, and difficult. There is also the matter of Grogu. Neither The Mandalorian nor any current canon source explicitly states that Grogu's blood was used in Palpatine's resurrection. That claim would go beyond available evidence, yet the thematic connections remain impossible to ignore. Imperial remnants seek Force-sensitive biological material. Scientists pursue methods for transferring or preserving unusual traits. Research programs trace their origins back toward Imperial-era experiments. Whether Grogu directly contributed or not, the broader scientific goal clearly aligns with the challenges Palpatine spent decades trying to overcome. Perhaps the most revealing unanswered question is not technical at all, it is philosophical. Why was Palpatine so terrified of death in the first place? Sith doctrine teaches the pursuit of power. Yet many Sith throughout history sought domination without dedicating entire lifetimes to immortality. Palpatine's obsession feels deeper. From the story of Darth Plagueis to the laboratories of Exegol, his entire existence reflects a refusal to surrender control. He could accept risk. He could accept war. He could accept the destruction of worlds. What he could never accept was an ending he did not choose. That realization brings us back to the image with which our journey began. Deep beneath the crimson storms of Exegol hangs a body sustained by machinery and ancient knowledge. Around it gather cultists, scientists, officers, and servants who have devoted decades to preserving one man. Fleets wait in hidden shipyards. Laboratories glow in the darkness. Yet despite all this effort, the figure suspended above the abyss does not look victorious. He looks trapped. The the greatest Sith Lord in galactic history, achieved the dream that consumed him since the days of the Republic. He escaped death once, but in doing so, he became dependent on fragile vessels, secret worlds, and endless maintenance. And so, the mystery of how Palpatine truly cheated death ends with an answer that is both grand and strangely human. He did not conquer mortality through a single miracle. He assembled fragments, ancient Sith rituals, essence transfer, cloning technology, Exegol's hidden infrastructure, the loyalty of the Sith Eternal, the resources of an empire. Decade after decade, he built layers of protection against the inevitable. For a time, those layers worked. Yet as the storms howl above the citadel and red lightning crawls across the distant sky, you can almost sense the final irony. The man who sought absolute control spent the last chapter of his existence fighting the one enemy no amount of power could fully defeat. And somewhere beyond the darkness of Exegol, the stars continue turning exactly as they always have, indifferent to emperors, empires, and even the ambitions of those who tried to live forever. What makes Palpatine's story so fascinating is that it appears at first to be a story about victory over death. Yet the deeper you look, the more it becomes a story about fear. Long before Exegol, before the Empire, before Darth Vader knelt in the ashes of the Jedi Temple, there was a man who could not accept limits. Every major decision Palpatine makes follows the same pattern. He refuses uncertainty, he refuses loss, he refuses endings. The tragedy is that each attempt to eliminate those things only gives them greater power over him. By the time he reaches Exegol, his entire existence revolves around preventing a future that every living being must eventually face. If you step back and look across the entire Star Wars saga, an elegant contrast emerges. The Jedi who achieve peace after death do so by surrendering control. Qui-Gon Jinn learns to listen to the Force. Obi-Wan becomes part of something larger than himself. Yoda accepts that life and death are connected rather than opposed. Even Anakin Skywalker finds redemption only when he stops grasping for power and chooses self-sacrifice instead. Palpatine walks the opposite path. He spends decades accumulating strength, knowledge, fleets, laboratories, and followers. Yet the more power he gathers, the more fragile he becomes, because every new possession becomes something he cannot bear to lose. This is why the mystery of his return fits so naturally into the larger logic of Star Wars. The saga has never been merely about battles between heroes and villains. It is about choices. Anakin chooses compassion for his son over obedience to his master. Luke chooses mercy over revenge. Leia chooses hope when despair would be easier. Ben Solo chooses redemption when darkness seems inevitable. Again and again, characters are offered control through fear or freedom through courage. Palpatine represents the ultimate expression of the first path. He chooses control every time and eventually becomes imprisoned by the very systems he built to protect himself. There is also something strangely revealing in the fact that Palpatine never truly stands alone. The Emperor often presents himself as the master of all events, the architect behind every plan. Yet his survival depends on countless others. Scientists labor in hidden facilities. Cultists chant within ancient temples. Officers command fleets. Assassins hunt children. Entire generations spend their lives preserving one man's future. The irony is difficult to miss. The figure who sought absolute independence ultimately becomes dependent on an entire civilization devoted to sustaining him. His immortality is not freedom, it is maintenance. Meanwhile, the people who oppose him succeed not because they possess greater resources, but because they remain connected to one another. Luke is saved by his father. Rey survives because her parents sacrificed themselves. The resistance endures because ordinary beings answer a call for help. Even the Force dyad between Rey and Ben is built upon connection rather than domination. Throughout the saga, relationships create strength, while obsession creates isolation. Palpatine understands power better than almost anyone. What he never truly understands is belonging. That absence follows him all the way to the end. And so when you think about the mystery of how Palpatine cheated death, the answer is both extraordinary and simple. He succeeded through ancient Sith knowledge, cloning technology, hidden worlds, and decades of preparation. The mechanics matter, the lore matters, the secrets of Exegol matter. Yet beneath all of it lies a much older truth. He could postpone death, he could outrun it for a time, he could build barriers against it so vast that entire fleets disappeared into their shadow. But he could never transform fear into peace. And without peace, there was always another battle waiting beyond the horizon. Now the storms have grown quiet, the fleets are gone. The chants of the Sith Eternal have faded into silence. Deep beneath the crimson sky of Exegol, a ruined throne stands in darkness while ancient statues watch over empty halls. Lightning flickers once across distant stone, illuminating the place where a broken figure once hung suspended above an abyss. Then the light fades, and only the whisper of the storm remains.